So yeah, welcome and thank you for being the brave souls willing to learn about plumbing today. So this is really important because the more that we learn, the more that we're able to help our neighbors out and the more that we're able to not get our pipes busted, right? So I want to thank both of you for coming and for sharing your knowledge with us and take it over. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing the back end work of setting up all of this and taking care of all of that for us.
Mhm.
Appreciate y'all. So my name is Brian Gordon. I kind of do basic plumbing work and handyman services. And this is Zach.
I'm Zach. I did new construction plumbing for about 15 years. I have a responsible master plumbing license and a medical gas license endorsement. So I've done it for quite a lot of years. I do pools and stuff now, but come down and help Brian out, show everybody how to kind of go over winterization processes, basic repair techniques, what to look for, quick fixes, more simple fixes, instead of having to go out of your way and spend thousands of dollars on a plumber, that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, and it's like what Rachel was saying. I think the reason why I'm kind of like trying to do some of these home repair classes and stuff like that is because a lot of the things I kind of learned on my own, and especially now with the internet and YouTube and stuff like that, we really have the opportunity to kind of like do a lot of research and kind of gain some of these skills, go to classes and things like that. So I really advocate that kind of learning and community skill sharing and stuff like that. So that was one of the motivations to have this. Also, after that snowstorm a couple years ago, just hearing about what kind of damage that had done to everybody's fixtures and stuff like that really kind of motivated me to have this workshop around this time. So a couple things that we'll kind of start off with are just basic tools that are kind of common whenever we'll be working on some of the plumbing, and then we'll talk about how those are used, and then we'll go over various areas where we got plumbing in the house, like the kitchen, the bathroom, the outdoor faucets, water heaters and things like that. And then we'll kind of talk about basic problems and situations that happen in those various areas, the kitchen, the bathroom, outdoors. And then we'll talk about weatherization in preparation of the weather coming up, how best to kind of prevent freezing pipes, and then also what happens if we end up, do have busted pipes or a freeze happens, and what are common problems that come from that and how to fix those. And I'm always not familiar on the terminology on some of the tool names and things like that here, but some of the basic things will be just crescent wrenches. There's a couple of different sizes of these. And these will be able to grab onto anything that kind of has the hexagonal shape onto a lot of the parts there. So right here we got just a regular nut that's used in this. I think another example is this is part of the drain system, and this is the valve that opens and closes that. You'd use a hexagonal wrench for a scenario like that. As you see, they can make open and close in a hexagonal shape. Another basic one will kind of be, I don't even know, just
the technical term for them is tongue and groove pliers, but everybody calls them channel locks. But it's used to grab onto pretty much anything that you can't get a crescent wrench on. I wouldn't recommend using it on anything that is an actual nut because it'll strip it out. But in the event that it's already stripped out, those are sort of your go-to. They'll grab damn near anything.
And you can do sometimes a little bit lighter things. So if I really need to get in here and gently kind of squeeze on this to move this, manipulate it in some way, these can kind of grab sometimes.
Yeah, sure, that's like your all-around tool. Kind of use it for all kinds of different things.
It'll be based on the pressure that you apply by holding it down on how tight that is. And that's why he was talking about sometimes it'll slip because we're just dealing with our hand pressure. This will kind of lock in that shape and create a rigid edge. These are also made to be adjustable like that. And then one of the last ones that we kind of experience a lot whenever we're working with, and I didn't get to bring too much of it, but galvanized piping, which is Some of the main piping, a lot of the older houses will have pier and beam, and we'll have galvanized piping all underneath the house that'll carry your water.
Anytime you have anything threaded that's metal, especially, the pipe wrench is going to be the main tool you're going to use to tighten and loosen it. And you always want to have two of them, because anytime that you're dealing with iron pipe, you want one wrench on the pipe to turn it, you want another wrench on the fitting behind it to back it up, because otherwise you'll end up turning the fitting and whatever else is down the line as well.
Yeah.
So when you're using a pipe wrench, make sure you have two for backing and one for leverage.
Yeah, one on the pipe and then one on the thing that you're trying to remove from that.
Yeah.
And so that galvanized piping will be that metal piping that we kind of see. I think the common size that usually is going
Half
into
inch,
the house
half
is
inch and
half inch
3/4.
to 3/4. Yeah.
You'll see 3/4 is the main coming from the meter to the house, and then pretty much all through the house you'll have 1/2 inch branches coming off the 3/4 lines.
A lot of people think that these are kind of broken too because of the give in there, but that's also just a mechanism in there that is made with the right angle. It'll cause it to grab onto the pipe and bite down. So it's made to have that adjustment until it grabs the pipe.
And then conversely, once it's locked in, that spring will allow it to back off when you're done with it, because otherwise it would get stuck on there.
Yeah, that way you can let go, yeah. So these are kind of some of the common ones. If you're dealing with PVC, let's see, where is that?
This
Oh,
way.
right. There's two ways of cutting that. There's kind of your regular hacksaw that'll just have small teeth on it, and that'll use to cut PVC, which is kind of like a plastic. And then there's also these, which I've used a lot. What size do these usually go up to?
Those, so I believe those are 1.5 to 2 inch. They're called ratchet cutters. These are great because for a lot of reasons you can get into tight spaces with them. The most important thing about them though, this blade is super sharp and it's very thick on the back end, so it supports the pressure that you apply to it. What you want to do, this is especially for, like we were talking about, your the water mains in the ground coming up. If it's something that you have to replace in line, so you would depress it, squeeze this, and as you start to feel it cut in, you want to kind of rock that back and forth so you don't crush the pipe. And then slowly, it'll cut right through it like butter. It takes a little bit of pressure, but once it's through there, you have a smooth, beveled edge, and it's ready for gluing or whatever else. Another thing, in addition to that, so that's actually, this type of hacksaw is most commonly used for cutting the bolts off of a toilet. When you set your toilet and you have the bolts sticking up from the floor flange, you use this to cut them even so you can put your caps on the toilet. These come in all different kinds of shapes and sizes, though of course you have the longer saws that are specifically for PVC, which are good for cutting in the walls and like anything overhead and also in the ground. The problem with them again is if you're in a tight space, you can't really get a good full pull on it, so you want to use something like those ratchet cutters.
There's also, this will also, because of the way that it holds the pipe in there, it'll help hold that cut and make a clear,
A flush cut.
Flush cut. It's also, you'll notice it doesn't have any burrs in it. So what often happens whenever we will cut with the hacksaw here, it'll have a lot of cut marks and debris on there. So a lot of these, and this is the case even for copper, you could use a little hacksaw and things like this, but it'll leave all of these saws will leave kind of little burrs on here. And so in those situations, you would either take some sandpaper and get in there and clean all those off, because we want these connections that are going to be on here, we want them to be completely smooth.
Yeah, you want them to be free of anything that would inhibit a full seal on a joint. Also, something you can do if you do have to cut with a saw, and let's say like this edge, you can see how it's burred. There's some pieces in there you can kind of see it's not cut fully all the way. You can take any sharp edge. You can take any sharp edge and kind of deburr it this way, and it'll pull it right out. You can kind of see it come all the way out there.
Because it's a soft metal.
Yeah, and the same with the PVC. So now what you have is I can put my finger in there, and it's perfectly smooth all the way around. You'll do the same with the PVC, if you do end up having any to deburr anything, you'll just clean it through just like that. And you can use the tip of a screwdriver, whatever, really, whatever's got a sharp edge on it, it doesn't have to necessarily be a knife.
So, kind of going in from the house, we'll start off and we'll kind of talk a little bit about the meter coming in, but that'll start coming in, usually a lot of the pipes underground and things like that will be this galvanized, or it'll be the old lead piping, things like that. Running underneath the house will be that lead piping. Once it starts coming up into fixtures, it'll sometimes start getting switched over into PVC. You can find copper underneath the house and in the walls and things like that. Oh, I forgot to bring, they got another product out there called PEX.
Yeah.
That's supposed to basically be an alternative to copper. What I experienced a lot during the freeze last year was a lot of copper was breaking. It's sometimes a really thin wall in there, and as that water freezes in there, it'll expand that pipe and bust it at various points along there. So it's basically kind of a plastic pipe. You might have seen it. It's sometimes like red for hot and then blue for cool.
They also have, there's several different types of PEX piping available. It's a polyethylene pipe. So it's flexible, but it's still rigid, and it has some give to it, so it can expand a little more than something that's as rigid as copper is. These are things that you can find at any local hardware store for the most part. And PEX is a really great alternative to copper repairs. If you're not comfortable with copper, you can cut into copper, and then you can put a fitting over it without having to worry about soldering and other types of things. I don't recommend it for major repairs. I don't recommend it for major remodels or anything like that. Copper, if it's done right the first time, is the way to go. However, in a pinch, it could save you thousands coming right off the bat. So if you do experience something like that, I do recommend looking into PEX piping. The fittings and the tools required for it are minimal, and it's very easy to handle. So that's for that anyway.
Is that similar? There's also that product Shark Bite kind of stuff.
So Shark Bite.
Those are basically attachments that are made. We can kind of get into a little bit of this. The difficulty with working with a lot of copper and things like that will be that you really have to start getting into things where you get a torch put together, and you'll have to use a PEX, which is like a kind of a cleaner. You have to clean the area, put this PEX on.
Flux.
And then, the flux. And then you would put on your solder into the wound, into the joint there. So that can get kind of complicated, you know. You gotta make sure that connection is made properly and stuff like that. So they made these products out there called Shark Bite. They're exponentially more expensive.
Yeah.
But if you're only dealing with one or two connections that you need to replace, those are sometimes the easiest things.
The shark bite fitting, what it'll end up looking like, if you're staring down the barrel of it basically, is you're gonna have your outer diameter, this is the fitting right. This part right here is an internal coupling that will go inside of the pipe that you have. And then what it has is a metal ring that's on the inside that's sort of flared all the way around, and it has these teeth. And under these teeth is a solid ring that it's attached to that's compressed. So when you push the pipe, when you take your pipe and you put it through there like that, those teeth are directional and it won't pull off. And think of it basically as like a Chinese finger trap is essentially how it works, but with a rubber like O-ring on the inside, so it keeps that pipe from allowing to leak. And again, they are great for temporary repairs. I mean, they can last anywhere up, you know, to a couple of years sometimes if it's an undisturbed location in the house. I don't recommend it, you know, like I said, for doing like new projects or anything. But it is as simple as cutting the copper, putting that fitting on there, and that shark bite will attach to the copper. On the other side, you can get one that has a PEX attachment. So from there you can run your PEX, or you can have a PVC attachment. From there you can run PVC, or whatever type of piping you would prefer to do. But like you said, unless you're comfortable with soldering and making those type of weld joints, I would not recommend it either, because Also, 9 times out of 10, if you're making a repair, it's because it's leaking, which means there's gonna be water in the line. Soldering with water in the line is near impossible unless you are very experienced at it. I hate doing it still. It's not fun.
Yeah, it's very difficult, so trying to get it, using those shark bites is sometimes the easiest DIY kind of way to deal with some of those products there. Whenever we start working with PVC, that's a lot more of a easier one to handle. So that one's basically made by connecting various connections onto it that will fit in elbows and brackets like that. And it's used initially by cleaning the area with a primer, which will be this kind of purple primer that you'll see, and then applying a adhesive PVC. There's all-purpose cement. There's some that are better for water, direct water contact, but a lot of those will work just as well. What this primer does is it's not only cleaning, but it's also softening that PVC right before that bond is made. And also whenever that glue is applied, it's making sure that that PVC is melted and bonding with that glue, and it really makes a strong bond. Once that happens, it can't be removed. You have to cut that joint out and add new pieces.
It's called a solvent weld joint because, like you said, the primer that you will use will actually heat the pipe up, and then the solvent itself will melt it together. The difference between these though, and you don't have to get a purple primer, especially if you're doing something indoors and you don't want to stain anything because the stuff is super messy. They make a clear primer that you can get. Just make sure that you are using a primer with glue in any application that you're doing it. This type of joint and pipe right here, this is pressure fitting. So pressure pipe, anything that's going to be water, domestic water coming to the house or inside the house. You don't want to use purple primer and glue. You want to use something called hot and wet blue glue, and it's specific to high pressure water purposes. It's a one application. It doesn't take a primer because it's so hot. It's a very caustic material. Like it's very bad at, you should wear a mask if you're going to be using it. But that's for anything that's pressure PVC. The glue and primer technique, these two right here, are going to be for your DWV, which is drain, waste, and vent. So anything that has water flowing through it, but that's not under pressure, that is what you want to use your glue and primer stuff for. That's, because it's not going to have any pressure under it.
And while we're kind of working on some of this, there is a difference between these kinds of connections on the pipes here. So these are most commonly found underneath the sink there. These are a different plastic than PVC. I'm not sure.
Well, it's still PVC. It's just the difference is in the schedule. So this is a schedule 40 PVC, which you'll find on any underground or in the walls type of deal. And this is schedule 30, which is a very thin wall PVC. So they don't match up to any of the other type of piping. They're fixture specific PVC fittings.
These don't deal with major high pressure. It's just dealing with the drain system. Water is going to be flowing out of it. It's not going to be backed up with pressure from the city water up into it. The connections on these are pretty simple. Often they'll be threaded. They'll have various kind of flares on it. There's another one here that I got. Sometimes they'll have a flared washer that's supposed to go in there, or on the other end of this, just kind of a little lip that's on the end of that one, and this will sit down there. Those are all various kind of connections that I'll have to deal with, how this is connected onto here. And you can get specific questions, sometimes just asking somebody in the aisle or looking up specifics on which rings would, which seals would match up with which connections on that.
So this actually, on this top part, the difference between these two, this is a flange fitting, this top part, and this only is going to go into the bottom of your sink because it's the only piece that's flat, and it'll go in just like this is here, which is this flat piece. Well, this is for a lavatory. This will be more for your kitchen sink types, which will have the basin in it. So this will go up. This is your first connection under the sink. This flange fitting, and there'll be a rubber gasket that goes in there. It goes down. This is your tailpiece, is what this is called. The tailpiece goes into the top of the P-trap with that flared washer, like he was saying. That'll tighten down, just like that. And this is, again, this is 10 times out of 10, if you have any leaks under your sink, it's gonna be from these kind of fittings right here.
These are very easy to work with on your own, very, manageable, because a lot of people will have to do maintenance on their sinks, even if it's maybe a rental or things like that. So a lot of these parts are made to be handled sometimes without tools.
Yeah, exactly. Most people can do it, without having to have a channel locks or anything. One thing I do wanna add, you don't need Teflon or anything like that, but whenever you're putting fittings together like this, where it's just compression because of the flare going inside of this ferrule right here, I like to put a little bit of pipe dope or some kind of lubricant or something that makes and creates a little bit better of a seal. Because if any sort of debris gets in there, even if it's tightened down all the way, it will allow for a leak to happen, to spring.
It's like the plumber's putty.
No, not plumber's putty, but pipe dope specifically. So this kind of stuff right here, it comes in all kinds of different things. As long as it says thread sealant on it, that's gonna be the kind of stuff you wanna use for any threaded joints or anywhere where a connection is being made where it's not a solvent or a weld joint. So connections like these, any sort of fitting connection, you're gonna wanna put stuff like that. And this stuff right here, actually, Rector Seal, the T+2, because it has Teflon in it, or PTFE, which is polytetrafluoroethylene, and that inside of this pipe dope is gonna be one of your best friends for stopping leaks like that from happening.
And moving on to the cast iron kind of piping. The metal piping will also be usually threaded on both sides, and we'll use the pipe dope or this Teflon on there. You can see we've used it even on this joint between the metal into the PVC threading here. So these will be the two things that you have to use on that.
So something that a lot of people, it's a common misstep. Anytime you're threading Teflon onto a threaded piece of pipe, always hold it in your left hand because threads always go to the right? So you want to start where the threads begin and go clockwise on it with your right hand. You want to go, if you have thinner stuff like this, I go about 6-7 times. They make thicker Teflon tape that you only really have to go about 4 times. The reason that it's directional is because now you see where I made the seal, right? It's folded over this way. So when I go to turn it, it's not going to bunch that Teflon up. When I go to put it in here, it's creating the seal that it needs to create. Now conversely, and I'll show you what happens when you do it the wrong way. Let's say you do it this way. I don't know if I can. It feels so awkward.
You can't do it the wrong way.
I don't know, it's like driving in England or something. I don't think I could drive a right passenger side car. It's awkward. It's so natural. All right. So you're gonna see what's gonna happen here. Look, it's already starting to bunch up. All that right there. So everything that's inside of those threads right now has taken that Teflon off, and you won't have a good seal, no matter how hard you tighten it down. So remember, always, they're left-hand threads, put it in your left hand, and go clockwise around the pipe.
The way I always think of it too, because sometimes you'll be you're looking at pipes upside down, you can't get your angle on there right. I always will take the piece that I'm putting it in there, just thread it on, and that reminds me which direction that's going, and you want the Teflon to continue in the threading of the piece that you're gonna put on. That's the way I usually think of that. So I think that covers kind of most of some of those. So those are the most common kind of piping that you'll be working with. And then we'll go ahead and kind of start walking, we'll kind of do a virtual walk through the house there and start looking at some of these things. So right as we start off here, we go out and you'll find your city main, which will be out there somewhat by the sidewalk on your property. And this is from the point where anything beyond the main this way, any leaks that happen out towards the street or anything like that, that is on the city side of the property. Beyond the house towards you will be your responsibility of maintaining any damages done to that. As this comes in, you might actually have some more details on maybe how some of this is calculated. But the main thing that I'm kind of looking for whenever I'm showing up and looking for potential problems or things like that is if you look right on the main there, there'll be a little red triangle that's sitting in a little circle right off to the side. I think I've even seen it as like a little blue like star, I think, in there on some of the new ones.
They have digital ones too that'll show, and it'll be flashing or something like that. The key thing to remember is if you're not running anything in the house, you're not doing laundry, you're not, filling up a tub, sink, dishwasher, anything, everything's off, and this thing is spinning, you have a leak somewhere, 100%.
So this is indicating, this will spin, indicating water is moving through this pipe. Water will only be moving in this pipe if water has a place to exit through a fixture or through something, or a leak or something like that. Like even if you just flushed your toilet and then you ran out there and you came and looked at this, you'd see it moving because it's filling up that toilet currently until that tank is full. It'll cut off, all the pressure will stop in the pipe and be held off, and that'll stop moving. And so we know that, okay, that's still going. If you happen to take for example the toilet, if we notice that there's a little bit of leak down in the bowl and it has to keep on filling up that tank, it'll slowly be spinning. Just, you have to watch it, but if it's moving at all, it's indicating that water is moving there. And that's sometimes how you can tell that there's a really small leak. You go out there and it's spinning really, really fast, you might have something bigger underground, and you might have to start looking for wet spots in the yard.
Yeah. The other thing too, the numbers on there are really important to pay attention to, especially in the summer months when you're like, oh, why is my water bill so high? I don't think I have any leaks. Human error is one of the biggest problems that you'll face in any aspect of life. This is included, because the guys who come out and read the meter, they'll see a number wrong, they'll see a number differently, and then all of a sudden your bill's twice as much as it should be. So if you want to take care of it and look at it yourself, you can go out there every month and see what that number is that shows that's your flow, that's your gallons, gallons per, I think, minute. I'm not sure exactly what it is. It'll indicate on there what it is, but you can log it yourself and go in once a month on the same day and say, okay, well I used 10,000 gallons this month, and then see what it reflects on your bill as, and then you can dispute it or whatever if you have to. I'm a big advocate of not allowing companies like Saws, who control water systems that we're not really able to do anything about, with stuff like this, because stuff like that goes under the radar all the time.
Yeah, you'll see you'll see the first read number and the last read number on your actual bill too. It'll have that reading on there, and that's where you can compare that to. If you notice that maybe, this is, the first number is already off and you're like a couple of thousand incorrect, you can see major differences like that, in the bill, if mistakes are made. So we'll kind of move on into the house, and we're going in, and probably the first kind of things that you might encounter are a fixture coming out, so that you can have a water hose fixture. And so that's our classic hose fixture faucet.
It's called a spigot.
Usually won't come out of, well, sometimes it'll come out of PVC. Yeah, but a lot of times you'll see it come out of the...
Yeah, it'll be the same. You'll have galvanized nipples sticking out. Typically, they'll stub out an iron pipe or a copper fitting, because if it's going through an exterior wall and then it's just exiting on the outside of the wall, there's not a fixture attached to it. It's better to have something a little more rigid. The only problem with that too is that's one of the main things that you have to worry about winterizing when the temperatures get lower, but we'll talk about that later.
And one thing to kind of keep in mind with this that often ends up happening, and there's a lot of confusing things like this in plumbing, but this looks similar to this connection here, but these are actually, this is, I forget what the term is. So it breaks down, but it's hose. It'll be like a hose line versus.
It's the type of threads he's talking about. So your basic, this thread right here, this thread count is the exact same as the thread count going into the PVC fitting. It's iron pipe, and you'll see it. It'll say MIP or FIP, which stands for male iron pipe, which is this, or female iron pipe, which is this. That's the receiving end, that's the inserting end, right? But on the end of any hose, the thread count is different. It's a much coarser thread count. So per half inch, you'll have 3 threads as opposed to 6 on the iron pipe fittings.
You won't see it too much, but it'll happen almost every time that you're using a water hose. That takes its own specific threading, and that's usually on the end of these pipes here.
Yeah.
But so say, for the same example, you can't also take a water hose and just put it onto a pipe like this, because this is not the same threading on the end right here.
You can, you just strip something. Really up to you, dealer's choice.
So as we go a little bit further into the house, you might encounter, maybe your kitchen is where the next line starts to go in. So as we get to the kitchen, we're gonna be dealing with things like,
Oh, did we bring any supply stops? There's some little supply valves coming out of the wall.
no, I forgot, yeah.
So
It'll be a
that's-
little quarter turn, but basically we can talk a little bit about what the bulb, what kind
So when,
of valves are.
the next thing that you're gonna be looking at, as far as, going down the line, is gonna be your stub outs. Once you're inside the house, everything coming out of the walls, going to your toilet, to your sink, to whatever fixture it is gonna have a supply stop valve coming out of the wall. Now those come in hundreds of different variations, and nowadays there's really only one that you should be using, and that is a quarter turn valve, because it just is a valve, it's a ball on the inside that turns one way or the other, and that's it.
Just 1/4 of a turn.
Right, exactly. The biggest problem you're gonna see is older houses have these very antiquated gate valves that have you have to turn them until they shut all the way off, or turn them until they're all the way on.
You gotta turn it over.
They will get stuck in positions, they rust over time. They're the worst design, but they're still out there. If you have the chance to replace them, they're not super difficult to replace. They can look daunting, especially because they're hard to get off. But if you don't have a quarter turn stop coming out of your walls, I would suggest repairing that when and if you can. It's a cheap repair, and it'll cost you less in the long run.
And one thing that's kind of common with those is basically that they will be using it's basically kind of just a screw that has a washer on the end of it. This will move up and down, and it'll plug this spot right here and stop water flow.
Yeah.
But those are the older fixtures. If you do get the opportunity, you want to, again, this one's PVC. The ones that'll come out of the wall are metal, that you'll notice, and they're a lot smaller.
No, they'll be chrome or
But it's a ball valve like this. So what we're looking at with the ball valve is right now it's closed as a ball that has a hole through it. And right now, whenever we open it up, you can actually kind of see that hole open up in there. So as it closes, you can do that. And we can pass this around too if you need another visual of that. But that's one of the most common ones, because that doesn't use a washer or a little piece of rubber that'll fail. You have to find that exact, you usually buy kind of like a miscellaneous washer kit to like fix those. But that'll come out, and it'll usually get into a faucet line like this. So this will come out, and this will almost be similar to your faucet that's in your bathroom sink. So this one's a bathroom fixture, but we'll kind of use this example for our kitchen sink as well. So it'll have a hose line that comes up from that valve to here. The reason why those valves are important is you'll see a valve anytime that comes out of the wall that you need to start maybe potentially doing any other repairs beyond that point, so that you can turn off this system and work on it with the water either still on, and systems like that,
Yeah, you can isolate one fixture so you can keep everything else on. You're not having to shut the water off at the house.
Going back to what we were saying about troubleshooting, if you are unsure if maybe a leak was coming from that, you can go and turn off the valves underneath your sink that go to this, and then see if your thing is still spinning. That's another way to kind of troubleshoot. You can turn off valves, start isolating the problem, trying to see, okay, whenever I turn that valve on, that leak reappears. That means it's from this point on somewhere that it's leaking. We'll start checking connections down here, all these up here. Again, metal on metal connections. Which ones are we going to use for this? We're going to use Teflon,
Actually,
Type build.
it's recommended, and I'll say this not to be contrary to you, but these flex lines specifically, this type right here, these are built in with a rubber gasket in it. That's designed to fit that flare right there. Not every single one's gonna be like that. They make different ones, but if it comes and it'll say lavatory flex supply line. Yeah, this will say plastic nut, hand tighten only, do not over tighten, do not use Teflon or Pico.
Okay.
So specifically, and you'll be able to see it, most of them are labeled, it'll let you know if you're supposed to use it or not, but you don't wanna use chemical on anything that's rubber or gasket like that, because typically it can corrode or eat it away or whatever else. But these are super easy, it's a really good design, you'll feel it start to tighten up, and that's that gasket inside depressing a little bit, that rubber seal. And right there is pretty much all you need. And once that's on, you're good to go. And these come in all different shapes and sizes, you know, they'll be for from your supply line to the toilet, to the tank, for your bathroom lavatories, for the kitchen sink, for everything else, so. For the most part, and it's the same on this side too, you can see that little white piece in there is the gasket, and that goes right on top of that supply line that we were talking about, the supply stop valve. It'll go right on top of that, screw right in, and you're done.
That moves up into on this one, it's gonna have a cartridge fixture that's gonna control the on-off for this. And then the last like little connection will be out here, coming out of there. So we can look at, if you're having leaks that are coming from underneath here, it might be the cartridge or the mechanism inside this. You can look at how there will be various ways that this is supposed to be dismantled here. This one looks like an old screw. And you can replace those cartridges, or you could just replace the fixture, this whole fixture here, and install new things onto that.
It's something we were talking about before too. A lot of the stuff, the DIY things that you want to do, and the reason we're talking about all this is we're trying to give you an idea of how to properly diagnose something, to know what to look for specifically, so that you're not like, well, I have no idea what it is. But a lot of it's just process of elimination. So like he said, once you've gotten to the point where, let's say you cut your supplies off at the bottom, you know it's somewhere between the flex lines and this right here, you know. With this specific one, this piece here.
Oh yeah.
That right there, the hot cold indicator is actually a cover for this. When you remove that, there's an Allen head inside of here. You get your Allen wrench, bust that loose, the handle comes right off. Now you can see how this is grooved here. This dome piece is what holds the cartridge in place. You unscrew that counterclockwise, and when you take that out, you'll be able to expose the cartridge, see if there's any debris. If there is, you can clear it and you put the cartridge right back in. And I don't have the stuff to take it apart with me right now. I kind of wish that I had, but it is as simple as taking it apart one by one and putting it back together the way that you found it. That will serve you pretty well if you pay attention to what exactly you're doing.
Take a picture of stuff sometimes before you
Yes,
disassemble
that's
it.
huge. Huge. I forget to do that all the time, and it'll save you so much. Another thing
That
too,
cartridge, I guess, before we move on real quick, is basically it has a series of gaskets in it, and it operates similarly to this old style mechanism where it's basically a screw or something like that that'll go down and plunge a gasket down and shut off one side versus the other, shut off both, or things like that. So you can replace parts of the gasket, or you can buy the whole unit. There's various ways to do repairs on that. Again, you could also just replace the fixture.
yeah, these honestly, this specific type of 4-inch spread lavatory faucet, like $30. You know what I mean? Home Depot or even a local place, you can probably get them for cheaper. Another big thing that you're going to experience, if there's any work being done in your neighborhood, whether it's San Antonio, so there's probably work being done in your neighborhood on a city line somewhere. Anytime that they repair something, no offense, city of San Antonio, sorry. Anytime they make a repair, they often don't flush the lines, and what happens is the surrounding community will end up with tons of debris in their water lines. So these aerators on any faucet, it's just a simple, very simple screw that goes, it goes on and off just like that. You take that off, pop this out, and this thing will be just chock full of junk, and you
It's
just
got
clean it
various
out.
screens in there.
Yeah, they've got, yeah, you can take out, you really, it's not necessary, they say it's water saving, but, you know, again, whatever, don't listen to me. But once you clear that right there, I mean, so many times people are like, oh my God, I have great water pressure again, and it's just this. And, further to that extent, if you take off any of these things, the same with your shower head, if you take that off, that kind of stuff, once every month, once every couple of months, soak in a little bit of vinegar, right as the mail. I mean, it's amazing what it can do.
Yeah, because we're getting a lot of water from the aquifer and things like that. We're getting a lot of calcium that's in that water. If you're not having a water softener in the house, which most houses won't, you'll see that calcium build up on the fixtures, and that clogs those little holes too. So, and that usually will be indicated by low pressure. Say you got other things right next to that. You got in the bathroom, all your faucets are flowing fine, but in your kitchen, it's real low pressure. That, then we know, hey, it's something about this. Let's start where the water comes out. We'll start here. We'll take this out. We'll look at that and see if that's it. If it's not, then it could be this next joint. We'll take that off and make sure there's no debris in there. And we'll have to go down to the next one and so on and stuff. But you don't want to kind of jump midway in the line there. You start from the exit and you follow it on kind of back.
Yeah, diagnosing anything, point of least resistance, and then work your way back slowly. Each little piece you would inspect it and go from there. One thing before we get further too, I forgot, well, as far as the meter,
Well, we could do that during the weatherization stuff of how to kind of. Well, yeah, I mean, we could do it. Yeah, if you're gonna work on it at all, or if you need to turn off and on your main valve. So as we talked about, like if you're working on a fixture here, you'll have valves underneath that. You can turn that off, and you can work on this with a water live. If for some reason you're working on maybe that first faucet that's out here, this is a valve, so you don't have your valve behind the valve to work on it. So you need your next valve that's in line is going to be your main. And so the way to turn on and off your main is a common tool is just this, which is just a simple thing that allows, you'll have your block on there like that, you'll put it on here, and you'll be able to twist it. This kind of just allows you to twist it down in that hole there.
It's called a water key, and I'm not sure of the price on where to use it. I personally, and
$20.
$20?
Yeah.
I've never used them because, in my experience, what I do every time is I take a pipe wrench, or a crescent wrench rather, and I'll stick it over that same slot and just put something through it. You see that?
So here, it'll go on just right on here like that. And then to get your upward motion here,
what you want to do, set it down that way with a screwdriver or something through it, and then you just use that to turn it. And it has the same kind of effect. If you don't already have a water key. If you want to get a water key.
Yeah, and that's, I only prefer these things if you're having to deal with that on and off a lot, Otherwise you can use some of these basic tools that you might have. And sometimes it can be really tough down there, so. I've also done some that were flooded. The whole things are like flooded, so it's easier just to drop that down in there and get it.
Yeah, very true.
So that's a little bit of that bathroom and kitchen sink kind of faucets. You'll notice as you go down, we talked about that P-trap. This is the reason that we have the P-trap here is to prevent, a lot of times whenever we're dealing with drains and things like that, there's going to be, those drains go into the same drains that your toilets and stuff come from. And so there's a lot of gases that come out of that, at methane and things like that, as that's like breaking, the materials breaking down and the solids and stuff that are breaking down in there. And so those are going to vent out of various pipes that you'll see come out of the roof of your house. Those are often like venting pipes. One way to prevent gas from coming back out into your drain into the house here is by having this P-trap, which is usually filled up with water, and it's always going to have water settling there. As new water comes in, it pushes that water out, and it leaves a new deposit of water in there. And so that water creates a barrier that gas can't come out and escape through.
The same thing on your toilet. That's called a P-trap right there. It creates a water seal, like he was saying. On your toilet, it's the same thing, except that it's an S-trap, which is actually how the water is pulled through it. It creates a vacuum every time it's flushed. When the water fills up past a certain point, it's the same with like siphoning gas, not that I know anything about that, but it sucks it through, down through, your piping into the main drains.
Yeah, you can see that on the toilet there. It's got that S curve kind of shape in there.
We're at, like 15 minutes.
Okay. Speaking a little bit of some of the toilet repairs we got inside the tank. This is an old valve system. This is an on-off floater. It'll basically turn off and on that. They got a lot of the newer mechanism will have this coming into there, and it has the floater is right on the pipe right there, and that floater will come up and down, and you can adjust that with a screw that's a little plastic screw that's going up in there. You can adjust that, and that'll allow how much water goes in your tank.
If you have these in your tank, get rid of them.
Yeah, they're bound to kind of fail.
I'd be
they
surprised.
got newer technology out.
Yeah.
And then the mechanism where the water goes is a large canister that lifts up and it dumps the water that's in the tank. We had a scenario a while back where the toilet wasn't fully like flushing that last gulp. That starts to, or you were talking about maybe leaking water down on the bottom underneath the toilet. So those deal with, right as you get past the toilet and this, you go through the ceramic S-curve, it joined down onto the floor, and the connection between that is with a big wax ring. So you have to pull that toilet off, you have to clean off the old wax as much as you can, and you'll put that wax ring, a new wax ring back on there, and you have to set that toilet back down on there, centered, bolt it back down, do things like that. If that connection is bad, it'll leak. If that connection is slightly off, it'll allow gas to come in, and that pressure won't, or air to come in, and won't allow that pressure to work as well, so you won't have that full dump.
Removing a toilet and replacing a wax ring is definitely a little bit above an intermediate skill. I would suggest, if you're gonna do it yourself, watching a lot of tutorials on how to do it. But it's very important that all your connections, like he was saying, that floor flange coming out of the floor, and a lot of times pier and beam houses, it's all wood, right? So you have a subfloor. Those things aren't level unless it's been built in the last 20 years. So you have to make sure that that floor flange is secured. It is not flush with the floor, but the floor flange itself is actually sitting on top of the exterior of the floor. So that when you put the wax ring on and you go to set your toilet, everything slides in, pushes down, and creates a seal so you can tighten everything down. Otherwise, like you said, you're gonna have a vacuum leak, you're gonna have water coming through, it's a mess and a hassle.
A lot of drains or something like that. I don't know if I've really seen this in the toilet or anything, but this will kind of be a basic little tool that you can often buy sometimes too. It's just a little snake that allows you to undo this. You can pull that kind of out, get that down into the tube, into the pipe there, and this allows you to spin the whole mechanism there. So it kind of just whips around in the pipe. It can go in and start going down through there. I'd probably say that's mainly if you're starting to deal with pipes that are like the metal pipes.
Yeah, so the handheld drum auger is great for anything under your sink, especially the kitchen sink, because it's got a lot of organic waste and things like that that are gonna get clogged up in there. So what you do is, this is the same kind of connection coming out of the wall. It's gonna be this nut and ferrule type. All you do is undo that and it slides right out, and then you have a sanitary tee going into your sewer line. And all you do is you take this and you pull it out and try to get it to go through and down that sand tube. As you loosen this screw right here, this is actually the set screw that keeps the cable in place or not. And as you spin it clockwise, what it'll do is allow that cable to spin freely, and that drum will push it out. And then when you get to the point where you've reached your obstruction, you tighten down this clamp, and that'll keep it there, and then you can kind of work it back and forth, and it'll keep that cable in place. And as you free the obstruction, or you clear the obstruction through, you just undo it. Yeah. And then spin it counterclockwise, and it'll start feeding it back into the drum. Now, as he was saying, a lot of people, this is another common misstep, with metal augers like this, metal snakes, you don't wanna run it through your toilet. You don't wanna ever run a snake through a toilet because it's porcelain. And if you run that metal through there and it's a bigger one and you start really cranking on it, all it's doing is busting the inside of porcelain with metal, and that has never worked out well for anyone.
So that's more for like under your sink and stuff?
Yes, ma'am, always, if it's a metal auger, you can put it through any PVC or anything like that, but if the toilet itself is clogged, you don't need that to get it out anyway. You can use a plunger or whatever else. And if it's that big of a clog in the 3-inch line going down it, that's not gonna do you any good either. You need to pull the toilet.
Mm-hmm.
Another big thing too that a lot of people.
I haven't seen much stuff, well, I guess I haven't worked with it too much, but getting clogged in that S-trap or anything.
It can, I mean, it definitely can if you have kids, you know, like, you're gonna have problems.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is.
Toy
Hot Wheels and 10 pounds of toilet paper all day. So, you know, they make a lot of really good plungers and different kinds of devices to blast through those S-traps. But if you have an obstruction in the line on a toilet, you can get up on the roof and run it through the vent. Every toilet's gonna have its own vent coming up because it's such a big fixture. And you can run it through the vent up top, and that will tie into the same drain that the toilet's flowing through, if there's an obstruction in that line. Again, that's kind of getting outside of the scope of like beginner to intermediate, and you're approaching a little higher levels of, you know, uncomfortability with what you can do or not. But those are the steps that you would take. But yeah, these super, super handy. Another big thing, if you have an AC unit and you're not monthly running vinegar through the condensation pan and through the P-trap that the condensation rolls through, you'll build up mildew and stuff, and you're gonna end up having to use one of these to go on the outside of the house and run it through that condensation line to pull all that mildew and stuff out. That's a huge thing too, people don't know, and it's plumbing related. But yeah, wherever your AC unit is in your house, go and look and see where the condensation line comes out. Where it comes out of that pan, there should be a P-trap, just like this. And it'll be like 3/4, maybe 1 inch. And it'll have the P-trap, it'll have a T coming from your AC unit right here, goes into here and drips down. And on the top here, it's open, so that you could pour vinegar and bleach or whatever other chemicals you want to pour down there to keep that line unobstructed. And especially in the summer months, believe me, it had piles up fast.
So lastly, those are kind of basic little household problems that'll come up. But whenever we start getting into the winter, we need to prepare the house a little bit more. I guess one of the, we can kind of start off with the most easiest way to prevent any kind of potential problems is if we have indication that there's going to be a freeze coming. You can fill up buckets of water, keep those around in the bathroom for a bucket flush, fill up gallons of drinking water and using cooking water, and then whenever that night comes for that freeze, then we'll just go and we'll shut off the main, and then we'll open up all of our faucets and let all the water drain out of our pipes, so that anything from our main going to our house is now completely empty. It'll have air in it, but it's less likely to freeze without any water in it. And we can really prevent all your fixture problems. All of that can just be solved by kind of preparing a little bit ahead of time and shutting that off.
Yeah, I can't stress enough the importance of this. This is your baseline. This is your first defense against burst pipes, flooded houses. I'm talking thousands, tens of thousands of dollars of repairs and other things. By simply going out, turning it. I mean, if we do have a freeze, we're gonna know about it. It's not just gonna sneak up on us like you know, oh, it was here one day and it wasn't. So, like he said, fill up some buckets, have some water on standby, you know, whatever else. You only need about a gallon to flush a toilet. You don't have to pour it in the tank, you can pour it right into the bowl, and the level of the toilet itself will flush it out. So you don't need a whole lot of water even stored up to do this. But like you said, go and cut the water off, turn it off. Go to your water heater, either unplug it or turn the gas off. Because another thing too is if the water's off and you leave the gas on to the water heater, that could that could spell big problems too. So, cut your water main off, turn off the gas or the power to the water heater, and then go around, the fixtures outside will be your lowest point. Open those and it'll drain everything down from your 1-story or 2-story or whatever, and then you leave one fixture open at the highest point, and that will unlock that vacuum sealer. Yeah, it'll allow everything to flow out. The water will still freeze on the outside. However, even if it's open like how we're talking about it doing, that water will freeze, but it will only freeze to where it can, the point of least resistance, right? So if you have so much room in your line for it to expand to, it doesn't matter if it freezes, it's not gonna burst your pipe. The only reason that the pipe bursts is because it is full of water and it only has one place to go. So doing this will eliminate any possibility of ruptured pipe during a snowstorm or during a deep freeze. I highly recommend it. If you're not in a position to be able to do that, there are other precautions you can take, such as insulation, armor flex. You've all seen the little styrofoam deals that we put on our spigots on the outside of the house. Those do work really well. Again,
wrapping them with cloth and stuff like that, you know,
towel
whatever you
and
can,
duct
because
tape, yeah. I mean,
these are fixtures that are exposed outside, and any of that, I've even seen these split apart.
oh yeah.
Like right at the valve there, so
I had
we're under.
those pool noodles, and I didn't have all that, you know, the.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
So I
that's
just cut it
a
open and
really,
put it
really
in.
good idea, actually.
And then I put tape around it.
It's the same thing. Jesus, that's brilliant. Cool noodle. Wow, good for you.
Yeah,
I'm gonna remember
probably
that.
even bigger than that too, like
Well,
bigger than that.
And so the thing that's proprietary to this specific brand, this is called Armaflex, right? You'll see it comes pre-split like this. And it'll have 2 tabs, 2 strips, and you'll pull them apart, and they're adhesive. What I've done here is essentially just I've cut, you know, 45 here and a 45-degree angle here, so that if a pipe's coming up out of the ground and it's got a spigot on it, you just do that, and these things will pop into place, and it'll keep it. But again, think about how much work that already is for one thing, as opposed to one turn.
Or, you know, we also got all those exposed pipes underneath the house, so you'd have to get underneath the house, you have to apply this to all of your galvanized piping underneath the house. As we go up into the walls, some of the old houses that we're experiencing, you know, that's where it starts to get tricky. If we don't have insulation in the walls,
Exterior walls,
then it's only got wind insulation, you know, and if it drops down for too long, it can freeze inside that wall there and bust inside that wall. You'll know you'll have a leak or something like that by indications of either the drywall or something like that, kind of, or dripping from underneath the house down that pipe, stuff like that. What we're trying to think. Any last parts of the weatherization?
I mean, for weatherization, that's pretty much it. We're kind of coming to a close anyway on that. Like I said, as far as winterization goes, to the extent he was saying under your houses and stuff, you're gonna want to insulate that stuff anyway. At some point, I would recommend it, just because it's better overall for efficiency. You know, you're gonna keep the hot water hot for longer. It's like, you know, it's just taking care of like the paint on a car. The longer that you keep it intact, the longer it's gonna stay. So if you don't have things insulated or you're not sure about it, you know, get over there and check. But
I've seen people do quick repairs. I kind of brought these. These are just big, regular pipe clamps. So this is one that has a little hand twist valve on it, and this one uses a flathead or a hex bolt. But basically, real quick, temporary. You know, you need to fix this. You need to get the water on for that day, and you need to get to the store. Or what was happening is whenever all those supplies were taken out, we were having to kind of really like just wing a bunch of stuff in there. So we were taking just other pipes, connecting them on like hose, flexible hose lines, and then tightening those up onto there.
yeah,
I wouldn't really recommend like anything being on there like longer than a couple of days or something, but
no, that definitely does work. There's a 5/16 nut on here. And like you said, if you just get a piece of, you put garden hose, like let's say there's a crack right there, you can get a piece of garden hose or like just a thin strip of rubber or whatever you have while the water's off, slap it around there, put that on, tighten it up real quick. You can keep the pressure on for a minute to do whatever you gotta do in the house and then go turn it back off. But yeah, it's definitely, that's barely a Band-Aid. So.
And there was, what Oh yeah, thawing, like, so if we, say your pipes do freeze and you kinda wanna work on getting them thawed out, it's been, we have a day ahead of us that's still gonna be, pretty cold, so it might be midday before those even get thawed out, like underneath the house. Just hitting it with a hair dryer on your outside fixtures, any pipes that you can get access to. You wouldn't want to use it on PVC or anything like that, but we're talking about the galvanized metal, which is most commonly the one that's probably going to be that's going to be outdoors and containing the frozen water up in it. So yeah, you'll be able to kind of just like, just work on that. Some of that water, or some of that heated water will kind of be moving down into the pipe and circulate, and slowly start breaking up more and more, and slowly kind of done it.
So if you turn off the water, like you were saying from the outside, from the main, does that drain the water heater? Like when you're, you said run your faucets, right, until everything.
So, yes and no, slowly it will, but when you go to turn off, the gas and the power to the water heater itself, the water heater has this on the bottom of it, and you just hook a hose up to it. If it's inside, if it's on an exterior thing, just open it up and let it drain out. If it's inside, you just hook a hose up to it and turn it on, and it'll drain the water heater all the way down.
Some of them might have a pan that has a drain in the pan.
Honestly, it doesn't need to be drained all the way down, because like I was saying, once the water level is taken out of the pipe, there's so much volume that's gone out of it, nothing's gonna freeze up that much space. So what we've.
Oh yeah, so you got that 40 gallons that is draining now into your empty pipes, but it's dispersed amongst the whole space of all those pipes. So the pipes are only half full or a quarter full, and that can expand and freeze without pressing against the wall of the pipe. And
it'll freeze laterally or horizontally instead of outward. You know what I mean? It'll freeze down the line and up the pipe instead of out this way.
One thing that was difficult that you'll interact is if one of these pipes bursts. Anything like this, if this breaks right here, we can cut this section right here, put a coupler on, and join in a new pipe.
Same with PVC.
Kind of band-aid some of that. Some of these things get a lot more trickier because usually it has to be threaded on each side. So you might have to take out that whole section of pipe that's threaded on there. And sometimes that gets even messier because there's an elbow, you can't turn the pipe without.
The problem that you'll have, anything.
So again, that's why you almost just don't even want to deal with the break of these, because it's just so complicated, down the line that you have to fix.
If iron pipe breaks in the middle of the line, it is undeniably one of the biggest hassles, because it's threaded directionally on either side. So if this splits, I can't back it out of the fitting over here because it's tightening up in the one over here. It's only gonna go so far. You have to cut it and break it loose from both sides. Now what you have to do is get a union that's threaded on either side and joins in the middle, and then you have to match this piece that you cut here and this piece you cut over here. Does that sound like too much already? Because it is. Trust me, you do not want that, yeah.
Don't do it yourself.
Yeah. So again, we almost always try to advocate locking that out. To confirm that you did make a full off position with your valve up here, we forgot to kind of talk about, is you'll have two places where a lock can go on. This will swing around and it'll line up with this, and that means that your system is off, because that usually allows, if you didn't pay your bill or anything like that, it allows them to come lock, to turn off your valve and then put a padlock on
When
that.
SALS determines that your basic right to have access to water to live, they take that away, that's what they'll do. So when you line those two holes up.
So that's what I've heard when they say that, yeah, I cut off the lock. I was like, all right.
Yeah.
So now
It is. It's just a padlock.
Yes, it is.
But you use those to indicate where your on and off are.
Also, like he was saying, once you have that valve in place, or I'm sorry, once you have it in off position, you'll also know if it's off because that red arrow, the ticker, the flow pin, will be spinning or not. If it's not spinning, your water's off. And that is quite simply the simplest way. Do you guys have any other questions about anything?
Questions that might have came up?
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you're working on the meter and turning it off, Is it better to turn it off on the side where, it connects to the main or on your cutoff?
It's best to shut it off at the meter itself.
Okay.
So the meter, that valve is gonna be connected to the meter itself. It doesn't matter what side, so let me
He's
clarify.
talking about sometimes as it comes down through
Okay, you have
here,
a cutoff down here.
people will add another valve right on here.
Well, of course, and that's your valve.
Mhm.
And like he was saying, the point of responsibility comes after the last piece of brass that's attached to this meter. That right there, anything after that is yours.
Okay.
But before that happens, there is a shut off for that meter specifically.
Mhm.
I recommend doing it from there, because let's say the valve that you have installed isn't in the best condition, or like the problem that she was having where the handle is just disintegrated off of it,
Mhm.
you're gonna end up getting screwed, might not be able to get your water back on.
Okay.
The city's meter or the city's shut off is built into the meter assembly.
Yeah.
So if that fails,
If this isn't working, that could be the city's responsibility to get that fixed.
Yeah.
I would also say, mostly any pipe that's underground will be insulated by the ground itself. The ground doesn't, freeze.
Not as
It does,
much.
but it doesn't happen in our area. It usually hasn't happened.
If your
But it's
pipe-
once the pipe comes out of the ground, that's whenever we need to start insulating.
Yeah.
We need to start protecting and looking at those precautions.
if your pipe, if your lateral line running from the meter to your house is under 8 inches, you're totally
Good.
fine. If it's above that, a little bit, but for the most part, code is 12 inches or lower, so it should be at least a foot below your surface.
I think that's